Hello everyone, this is Club 10M Plus's exciting new podcast that's here for you. We are all about stories, new developments and learning about individuals. Our hope is that you will join us every week to hear about our distinguished guests. We hope to inspire you, bring you laughter and make you reflect. Our guests come from all walks of life and primarily they want to share their stories. Not sure about you, but I love a good story. So Club 10M Plus have devoted their time to creating these podcasts, to sharing great ideas and stories and much more. So tune in every week to make sure that you don't miss out. It could be you next week. Want to know more? We want to hear your stories. So sign up and be our next guest. Hi, and good morning to you, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining me this morning on Pitch the Panther. We're going to cover a subject that's not always spoken about, but it happens to everybody in some form or other. And I'm going to hear from the coach herself, and she's going to talk about informed trauma. And trauma in itself, or trauma, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is quite a deep subject, isn't it, Catherine? And I don't think today we're going to have a chance to cover it all off. So I'm handing the reins over to you. Please explain a little bit so we can understand and tell us your story and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay, yeah, like you say, trauma is such a huge subject, and we're not even going to scratch the surface really today. But to just give you an idea, so now I am a trauma-informed coach, which means I look behind the reason for the presenting problem or the presenting behavior. I look behind that because there's always a reason that problematic behavior presents itself. Unresolved trauma presents itself through behavior, and behavior is a symptom of an underlying trauma. So I got myself on this path because I was that person who carried unresolved trauma for 20 years. It happened in school, which often trauma is derived in childhood. There's many opinions for this. For me, it's because you're going through such massive changes in childhood. You're very vulnerable, you're impressionable, so it's easier for you to be led, or you're just at a more vulnerable age. So for me, I was the classic slip through the education system. My trauma was completely overlooked. I very very common. My parents split up, and I then started getting into the wrong crowds. I was avoiding being at home with my mother because the relationship broke down so terribly. So I would roam the streets on an evening, and I was groomed and trafficked for sexual exploitation. And that, because I was at a stage where I had nobody to talk to, I carried that around with me and just, as so many people do, just pushed it down and tried to forget about it and get on with my life. Trauma will always present itself through behavior. So it presented itself through self-harm, promiscuity, alcohol abuse, and it was overlooked. In school, nobody sort of looked at the reason my behavior had changed. And also what happens with trauma is, because my parents had split up, it was assumed that that was the problem. See, trauma, there can be an obvious trauma, but then actually there can be lots of branches off of that trauma that can be causing a problem. So it's never the obvious thing. It's never ever the obvious thing that presented itself. You must always look behind the reason, always look behind the behavior. So I went through school, and I started getting bullied. So to avoid bullies, I would play truant, and I was excluded at 14 for repetitive truancy. And then they sent me to another school in a different part of the county. And as soon as I got there, the bullies started on me. But what's interesting is, because by that point I was so full of self-loathing and my self-worth was just non-existent. I almost encouraged them to bully me. I almost wanted them to hate me, or I felt they should hate me as much as I hated myself. So unconsciously, I encouraged them to bully me. And then I started playing truant again, and I was excluded from there 6 months later. And that was the end of my education at 15, of my high school education. Um, I was really lucky because I was born with an obsession for horses, and it's not really a thing in my family, horses, but I was just always obsessed. And my parents did find enough money to send me for a riding lesson once a week, which I'm eternally grateful for. And we didn't own horses, but I would always find a way to be with horses. About a 30-minute walk from my house, where I lived with my mother, there was a horse sanctuary, and I would spend as much time there as I possibly could. And they were kind of my shining light. They were my hope. They were what got me out of my life, out of my head. They were my escape. And so when I was excluded at 15, that was the end of my high school education, I went and threw myself into working with these horses at this horse sanctuary. And at 16, I actually left my mother's house and moved in to this leaky little caravan on the horse sanctuary. I mean, it was it leaked. It was the most awful living situation. It didn't have a toilet on the property. It didn't have a toilet. It didn't have electricity. Everything was done off a car battery. I mean, it was just. But I was out of the home environment had become very toxic, and I was out of that, and I was surrounded by horses all day and all night. So I was happy, and I started to heal. Also, I thought what I had actually done is thrown myself into something that could hide me from my trauma. So horses became my mask, and I went through my career. I got better and better jobs, and I really threw myself into horses. The self-loathing was just there every day. I just thought that was normal. I began to think that was normal. I stopped self-harming in my early 20s. It just came to a natural halt. I found other ways to deal with that. I'm really into hiking and walking, and that really helped with that. So I got past that. But yeah, the self-loathing, promiscuity, the overworking. I would work myself into the ground. Alcohol abuse. I didn't think anything of it, to be honest. I just thought it was how I was, and I had no idea that this trauma was still festering inside of me and pushing all these behaviors out of me. So I just went through my life like that. And in 2016, everything came to a head, and I had a bit of an epiphany, really. And I had my own horse training business then. I was living in Saskatchewan, Canada. Um, and I wound it down, and I looked at myself. And once horses were away from me, I felt so exposed. I felt like I was that teenage girl again. That's what happens when you remove the mask and actually look at yourself. You're transported straight back to when that trauma derived. So I threw myself into self-development and healing and figuring out how to heal, and went on this massive journey. It was an incredible journey, and knew that I needed to be on the path of helping other people get through this, so that they're not carrying trauma throughout their lives, because it's so unnecessary, and it's debilitating, and it did affect my success, and like I say, my self-worth, and it removed the amount of joy that I could have had in my life, because I was carrying this around, this unnecessary thing around.
I'm going to interject here because, wow, I've been listening to your story and I knew it was going to be powerful, but you have really touched me because there's so many things there. The behavior that came out as a result of one thing and you not actually being aware at that age. And I mean, you're not alone. This is a scary thing. You are not alone. Your story is not one that just is stands out. It is
No,
pretty
I
much
know.
the norm. I mean, there are
Mm,
so many parents that get divorced. There are so many parents that don't want to, but it happens. Their children become estranged. There are, they can't relate to them in whatever way because we close down as individuals. we don't open up, we don't understand where we need to heal from. And honestly, it is, you know, I'm just overwhelmed right now, and I'm obviously sharing how I'm feeling about your story. But Catherine, I mean, through all of that, where have you found the strength? I mean, it wasn't the horses for sure, because like you said, you took your mask off, and then it was Catherine again.
Where did my strength come from? Hmm. I get, well, when you resolve your trauma, when you work through it, you've got to face it. First of all, you've got to face it. You've got to face it and accept it, and then you can start to build, and it builds resilience. If you resolve your trauma, it builds your resilience. So yeah, it will build your personal strength. So by working on self-development, building confidence, setting yourself small challenges that you can achieve, learning, all this builds confidence and self-development and self-worth. So which, yeah, in turn builds resilience.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, I always, my philosophy now is like, don't stop learning anything, whatever you want to do, just do it, because time is what you have. Outside of that, that is your gift. You've got time, and use it wisely in that sense, and then learn something, better yourself, because you're right, it builds your
Absolutely.
resilience, it gives you your confidence, stepping out of your comfort zone. And you hear all of this stuff, and people go, how do you do that? And you're like, well, actually do something you've not done yesterday or you've never done before. And it's just do something
Yeah,
else every day that pushes you over the edge, that makes you, drives you.
absolutely.
Yeah, and then dealing with trauma, you kind of learn about yourself, don't you? Because you kind of go, well,
Definitely.
actually, I can handle this because I know this. And it's such a different feeling of confidence as well. So I'm going to ask you, what's the takeaway that you're going to give everyone today that they need to know?
A takeaway is, when people hear the word trauma, they think, "Oh my gosh, trauma! It's a big scary word." But actually, trauma can come from anything. It's the emotion we attach to an event that causes trauma, not just the event. So, and everybody reacts differently to different things. Everyone has their own levels of resilience and coping skills. So, if something's happened and you feel, actually, I feel that has stuck with me and I feel traumatized from that, but then think, well, other people might not think it's bad enough. That doesn't matter what other people think. If you feel that something has stuck with you and left you feeling traumatized, then that's your prerogative to say that and feel that. Don't be think it's nobody else's decision to judge whether you have the right to say that caused you trauma or not. I do find that I find people hold back because they think, well, it wasn't that bad, so I'll just keep quiet.
Wow. So speak up, I think I'm hearing. Shout out.
Definitely, yeah.
It's
Speak up.
it's you
Yeah,
that's important, and not everyone else's
absolutely. It
thoughts.
doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. No,
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate that today, and your time as well. It's lovely having
no,
you
you're
here.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. This is Club 10M Plus's exciting new podcast that's here for you. We are all about stories, new developments, and learning about individuals. Our hope is that you will join us every week to hear about our distinguished guests. We hope to inspire you, bring you laughter, and make you reflect. Our guests come from all walks of life, and primarily they want to share their stories. Not sure about you, but I love a good story. So Club 10M Plus have devoted their time to creating these podcasts, to sharing great ideas and stories, and much more. So tune in every week to make sure that you don't miss out. It could be you next week. Want to know more? We want to hear your stories, so sign up and be our next guest.